The kindest people in any friendship are usually the first ones abandoned, not because they did something wrong, but because they made staying too easy. You already know this. You've felt it in a friendship that only calls when they need something. There's a name for what keeps you there anyway. Obligation theater. Performing loyalty long after the friendship stopped being real. Machiavelli spent his life studying exactly why loyalty like this collapses and what to do the moment you see the cracks. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to walk away cleanly, calmly, and without a single ounce of guilt. But first, if you've ever felt unseen in a friendship you kept showing up for, type the word "seen" in the comments right now. Let's begin. The first lesson is this: the myth of unconditional loyalty. Think about the friend who only texts when they need something: a ride to the airport, a shoulder after a breakup, someone to vent to at 11 at night when nobody else picked up. The rest of the time, silence. No check-ins, no just thinking of you, no memory of the thing you mentioned was stressing you out last week. Now think about the group dinner where every conversation somehow circles back to them, their job, their drama, their plans for the summer, while your bad week from last Tuesday never even comes up, because you never brought it up and they never asked. You went home that night telling yourself it was a good dinner. It wasn't. You were just fluent in not noticing. Here's why this happens, and it isn't a character flaw in you. Most conflict-avoidant, introverted people were taught early, sometimes by a parent, sometimes by an old friendship, sometimes just by temperament, that love is something you earn by being useful, not something you're simply given. So you built a habit of over-functioning, showing up early, remembering details, absorbing moods before they're even spoken, smoothing things over before conflict has a chance to surface. That habit felt safer than risking that someone might not choose you back on their own. The trouble is, that habit doesn't just protect you. It trains people around you to expect it as the baseline, and it trains you to mistake being needed for being valued. Two things that feel almost identical from the inside and are almost nothing alike. Machiavelli warned rulers about exactly this dynamic when he wrote about mercenary soldiers, men who fight for pay, not conviction. He said that if you rely on mercenaries, your ruin is at hand, because they are ambitious, undisciplined, and faithless the moment the money stops flowing. A fake friendship runs on the same fuel. It isn't held together by genuine investment in you as a person. It's held together by convenience, by proximity, by the fact that you're easy to lean on. And convenience, like a mercenary's loyalty, evaporates the second it stops being convenient for them. The mercenary doesn't betray you out of malice. He simply never signed up for anything deeper than the transaction. So here's what to actually do with that. First, for the next 2 weeks, quietly track who initiates contact, not who responds, who reaches out first, and why. Second, run a simple audit and be honest with yourself about the answer. Does this person show up when things get hard for you, or only when things are easy for them? Third, stop initiating contact for 1 full month and simply observe what happens, not as a punishment, not as a manipulative test, but as data collection, so you're no longer operating on hope instead of evidence. But knowing the pattern isn't enough. You need the eyes to see it in real time before the excuses talk you out of what you already know deep down. That's lesson 2. The fox sees what the heart denies. Picture this. Your friend delivers a backhanded compliment disguised as a joke. Wow, you actually did something with your hair for once. And you laugh along because making it a thing feels dramatic, feels like you're the one overreacting. Or picture finding out, through someone else's social media story, that the family emergency they canceled your plans for was actually a spontaneous trip with other friends. The same night, the same city, just without you. Your brain will fight you on believing either of these things mean anything. That's not weakness. It's a defense mechanism doing exactly what it evolved to do. When you've held an identity of closeness with someone for years, Your mind will work overtime to explain away contradicting evidence, because updating that belief feels like a small grief you'd rather postpone. For people who avoid conflict, this bias runs even stronger, because facing the truth might mean facing a confrontation you've spent your whole life architecting your personality around avoiding. Machiavelli's most famous image addresses this directly: the fox and the lion. He wrote that a prince must know how to act like both animals: the lion to intimidate wolves through strength, and the fox to recognize traps that strength alone cannot see. Those who rely only on the lion's power, he said, do not understand what they are doing, because strength without awareness simply walks forward into snares it never noticed. You cannot use a lion's courage to leave a friendship if the fox's eyes never open to see that you are standing in a trap in the first place. Courage without clarity just gets you hurt somewhere new. So train the fox first. Start naming specific behaviors instead of vague feelings. Not, they're being distant lately, but they canceled on me 3 times this month and lied about the reason at least twice that I can prove. Ask someone neutral, someone genuinely outside the friendship with no stake in the outcome, to describe what they observe from the outside. Because outside perspective cuts through your bias faster than any amount of self-reflection. And for 2 weeks, simply journal every instance without judgment, just plain observation. So the pattern has to speak for itself, instead of hiding behind the story you've been telling yourself. Once you can see clearly, a new question appears. One far more uncomfortable than, are they treating me badly? The question becomes, why do I keep waiting for luck to fix this instead of doing something myself? That is lesson 3. Fortuna is not an excuse to wait. You tell yourself you're waiting for the right moment, for them to finally apologize, for some external event to reveal the truth so obviously undeniable that acting on it feels justified rather than dramatic. Months pass. You tell yourself maybe they're just going through something, and you keep quietly absorbing the cost of that maybe, alone, while the calendar keeps turning. This is what psychologists call an external locus of control, handing your own agency over to fate, hoping the situation resolves itself, because acting on your own terms risks the discomfort of confrontation and the fear of making it a bigger deal than it needs to be. Waiting feels safer than deciding, but waiting is still a decision. It's simply one you're refusing to take responsibility for, dressed up as patience. Machiavelli described fortune as a raging river that floods the plains, sweeping away trees and buildings when it rises with force. Yet he insisted that men are not powerless against it. When the river runs calm, he wrote, people can build dikes and dams to contain it before the flood eventually returns. In other words, you cannot control whether your friend changes, matures, or ever notices what they're doing, but you can build your own dams, boundaries, expectations, a defined exit point before the flood arrives, not while you're already standing in the water. Here's how you build that dam in practice. Set a personal exit criteria in advance. For example, if this exact pattern repeats 2 more times, I step back. No renegotiating with myself in the moment. Stop waiting for permission from the universe or from them to feel justified. They'll notice eventually. Is not a plan. It's a hope wearing a plan's clothing. And give yourself a defined timeline rather than indefinite patience. Because patience without a boundary isn't virtue. It's just prolonged waiting, dressed up to look noble. But even once you decide to act, one fear still holds most people back completely. A fear so predictable that Machiavelli practically wrote its explanation 500 years in advance. That fear is what we tackle next. The cost of staying is always higher than you think. You imagine what happens if you pull back. They'll tell everyone you're the bad guy. You'll be painted as cold, as dramatic, as ungrateful for everything they supposedly did for you. Or you imagine the loneliness that follows. All that shared history, all those inside jokes, all those years, gone in one decision. And suddenly, staying uncomfortable feels easier than starting over with no one at all. Your brain isn't lying to you on purpose here, but it is badly distorting the math. Loss aversion means we feel potential losses roughly twice as intensely as equivalent gains. And social threat, the fear of reputational damage, of being talked about, of being misunderstood by mutual friends, activates the same neural alarm systems as physical danger. So an unknown, imagined social fallout feels far more dangerous to your nervous system than a known, ongoing exhaustion, even when that known exhaustion is quietly costing you more, week after week, than the imagined disaster ever would. Machiavelli observed something sharp about this kind of fear. Men are so simple and so ruled by their immediate circumstances that whoever wishes to deceive will always find someone willing to be deceived. The deception at work here isn't only coming from them. It's also the story you're telling yourself about how catastrophic walking away will be. You are frequently the one convincing yourself to stay, more thoroughly than they are ever working to convince you. So shrink the story down to its real size. Write out the actual worst-case outcome of distancing yourself in specific detail, and then honestly rate how likely that outcome really is. Then compare that number to the real, measured cost of staying. Your energy, your resentment, the hours you spend managing someone else's inconsistency instead of living your own life. And ask yourself one clarifying question that cuts through the fog fast. Would you tell a close friend in your exact position to stay? Once the exaggerated fear shrinks down to its real size, something shifts. You start noticing the mask this friendship has been wearing all along. And that mask is exactly what Lesson 5 exposes. Appearance versus reality. The mask of friendship. Some friendships perform closeness in public. Affectionate, complimentary, arm around your shoulder in every photo, glowing captions on your birthday. While privately, they're dismissive, distracted, or simply absent the moment no one else is watching. Some post the anniversary of friendship tribute, the love you comment for the whole timeline to see, but never once show up for the private moments that actually cost something. The hospital visit, the 2 a.m. phone call, the quiet Tuesday when you just needed someone to sit with you and say nothing at all. This is a performative relationship, one where the appearance of connection serves a social function for them, a kind of social capital they cash in publicly, while the private investment that makes a friendship actually real is never paid at all. Machiavelli captured this exact split between image and truth when he wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." It cuts both ways here. They've been curating an appearance for their audience, and you've been reading that curated appearance instead of the private reality for far too long, mistaking the performance for the proof. Start evaluating this friendship by private moments only, and discount the public displays almost entirely. Treat them as unreliable evidence, because they usually are. Notice whether their warmth only appears when there's an audience present to witness it. And if you want undeniable proof rather than a hunch, run one honest test. Bring up something genuinely vulnerable to them, one-on-one, with absolutely no one else around, and watch closely whether they actually show up for it, or simply perform brief concern and move the conversation back to themselves. Once you can separate appearance from reality, walking away stops being an emotional decision and becomes something far more powerful, a calculated one. That calculation is Lesson 6. The lion's courage to cut cleanly. Most people don't end a fake friendship. They fade it. Weeks of half-hearted replies, delayed texts, hoping the other person will just get the hint, so neither of you has to say anything uncomfortable out loud. It drags on for months. Both people quietly resentful, neither one honest, until the friendship dies slowly from 1,000 small avoidances instead of one clear decision made in daylight. Here's the psychology behind why the slow fade often hurts more than a clean ending. Ambiguity keeps your nervous system on alert, checking and rechecking for resolution that never comes. An unresolved threat produces more sustained stress over time than a resolved loss, even the painful one, Because your mind can't close the file. It keeps reopening it, rereading old messages, wondering if you imagined the whole thing. A decisive ending, however uncomfortable in the exact moment it happens, lets your nervous system actually close that file for good and start moving forward. Machiavelli's most debated piece of advice was that injuries, when they must be done at all, should be done all at once. So their bitterness is felt only briefly rather than dragged out and tasted fresh every single day for months. We are not talking here about harming another person. We're talking strictly about the psychological logic underneath his advice. One honest, brief conversation, or one clear and final step back, causes far less lasting damage to both people than months of ambiguous, half-hearted withdrawal that leaves everyone guessing. So decide your method based on what's actually safe and appropriate for your specific situation. A short, honest conversation, or a quiet, steady reduction of contact if a direct conversation isn't safe or realistic. If you do speak, keep it brief, calm, and entirely free of blame. One clear sentence, not an opening for a debate you don't need to win and were never going to win anyway. And once you've done it, do it once. Stop relitigating the decision in your head every night. You already made it with clear eyes, using every lesson that came before this one. But walking away cleanly only means something if you have somewhere better to walk toward. That's where we finish. Building new alliances on virtu, not fortuna. After leaving a draining friendship, a strange thing often happens. You feel unmoored, unsure how to even build a real one from scratch. And when someone new does show up in your life, the old habit creeps back in almost immediately. Over-giving, over-explaining, trying to secure the bond fast before you even know if it deserves your trust. The exact same pattern that got you here in the first place, just wearing a new face. Machiavelli drew a sharp distinction between states built on virtu, one's own skill, sound judgment, and sustained effort, and those built on fortuna, pure luck or inherited circumstance. States built on virtu, he argued, endure through changing conditions because their strength comes from within. States that rest only on fortune collapse the instant conditions shift because they were never actually strong to begin with, only lucky. The same logic governs friendship. Bonds built on shared values and mutual, reciprocal investment last through distance and difficulty. Bonds built only on convenience, proximity, or shared history collapse the moment those conditions change. A move to a new city, a new job, a new season of life neither of you accounted for. He also warned that a ruler who builds his entire position on the goodwill of others, without a foundation of his own strength underneath it, will fall the instant fortune turns against him because he never controlled his own footing to begin with. Translate that into friendship and the lesson lands hard. Don't hand your sense of belonging entirely over to people who haven't yet proven they'll hold it carefully. So going forward, evaluate new connections by reciprocity from the very first weeks, not by potential, chemistry, or nostalgia for what closeness used to feel like. Match their effort instead of front-loading all your trust and energy before it's earned. Let the relationship prove itself at its own pace, and rather than scattering yourself thin across many shallow connections, trying to replace what you lost all at once, concentrate your investment into a few strong ones. A quiet Machiavellian principle worth carrying forward. Concentrated strength holds under pressure. Scattered strength gets picked apart piece by piece. So here's everything you've just learned in one breath. Fake loyalty runs on convenience, not conviction. Audit who actually shows up when it costs them something. The fox has to see the trap clearly before the lion ever finds the courage to walk away from it. Waiting for fortune to fix things is still a decision, whether you admit it or not. So build your dam before the flood arrives, not during it. The cost of staying is almost always higher than the story you've told yourself about how bad leaving would be. Appearance and reality are two entirely different friendships. Judge only the private one, never the performance. A clean cut, however hard in the moment, heals faster than a slow fade that drags on for months. And the next bond you build should rest on your own judgment and their proven effort, not on luck, history, or convenience. Which of these 7 lessons hit closest to home for you? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and I mean that. If this video gave you something you needed today, subscribe, because there's a lot more where this came from. And remember, stay clear-eyed, stay kind to yourself, and stay powerful.